So a lot's going on. Uh, they found the bits and pieces of that sub. So apparently it imploded. So hopefully that meant that those men didn't suffer. That it was over before they even knew what hit them. And speaking of things hitting us, I'm literally in the battle of my life prayer wise, and I'm trying to get the circulation to come back into my feet and my hands. And on top of it all, the YT Thought Police gave me a strike for having talked about the jab and the cough during my coffee with PopPop video, which was nothing of the sort. So in any case, it seems that they're scrutinizing my channel, and you have to be careful, fam, because even using replacement words for certain things now are in the no-no list. I worked for a guy who programmed, and I watched how it's done. They take common words, and there's a screen, and they just type in common words with a comma, and then they go on to expressions that are not so common, so that literally every time the computer bumps into one of those words, it scrutinizes what's being said and either blocks it or cancels it, But I think this was a person. I think this was probably a troll who did this, out of spite. But the video had nothing to do with anything. And I clicked on the hey hungry. I clicked on the site to dispute the strike in YouTube creators, and it wouldn't connect me. So it's just a whole bunch of shamalama ding dong and trifling and all that other stuff. But you see, fam, where wokeness gets us. If you look, for example, and I want to be careful with my words because of the families that are grieving the loss of these 5 men that essentially got into a submersible coffin, and lost their lives. The owner of the company said that he, quote, he didn't want to hire 50-year-old white men, because of their experience. He wanted to hire younger staff because they were exciting and all of this other stuff. And so, we have a government that doesn't work because of wokeness. And here this guy cost lives because of wokeness. He said, well, he didn't want experienced 50-year-old white guys. He wanted young people who would bring excitement and imagination to his company. And then, as it turned out, he built the thing of off-the-shelf parts. And then he built the thing out of resin composite like they make airplanes out of, resin composite and titanium. And he said he knew that that was a no-no. And then on top of it, he used a game controller. So the submarine was drive-by-wire. So that means that essentially they could have been in that submarine and the two little AA batteries in that controller could have gone dead. And they could have lost control over the sub that way because there was no direct control like the one that what's his name used when he made the movie Titanic. What's his name, the producer and actor, I forget his name. The guy who's so high on himself all the time. But in any case, you're sitting in this little tube with a laptop, no seats and no seat belts, and a little game controller. There's a video of it. You can see it for yourself. A little $30 game controller to control the sub by wire. And it's not even by wire because the game controller was, radio controlled, like a toy submarine. And then they got into it. They got into the sub, and apparently they get bolted into the sub. And, they said that was a no-no. That unless they could get up to the top and have somebody unbolt the thing and let them out. So there was a whole bunch of design flaws that they knew about and that the guy didn't tell his guests. But one of his employees quit and then turned around and sued the company, as a whistleblower. And apparently that didn't do much good. So that shows you another thing, that even though a couple of them were very rich people and they got their way by being able to get on this sub and go visit a grave site, which is what Titanic is. And anytime you violate a grave site, there's consequences. I don't care what anybody says, taking things out of Titanic and bringing them up to the surface is a violation of a grave site. They ought to just leave it alone. And as long as people, keep fiddling with it, there's going to be DEATH associated with it. So there's nothing they can do to change the history of it. They pretty much knew all of the flaws that Titanic had that made it sink. There were several of them, like half a dozen flaws that combined to make the thing sink. So it's a grave site. They ought to respect it and leave it alone, just the same as they ought to leave the USS Arizona alone at that memorial. Let the DEAD rest in peace. But in any case, our whole world is full of folly and wokeness, and we're always studying, but never coming to the knowledge of the truth. We're always discovering another 138 genders, but we're not teaching our kids the ABCs or how to read or write or anything like that. It's a mess. We made a mess of everything. But I'm going to get off the camera right now because, like I said, I am in the I'm in the prayer struggle of my lifetime, and I literally have to pray resurrection prayers over my body at this point. The prayer of Abraham and Sarah for reconstruction, and the prayer of Methuselah, for rebirth and everything. Otherwise, I'm stuck, fam. I don't want to go into a nursing home. I've been in the position of being abused when other people said they were taking care of me and didn't give me as much as a glass of water to drink or a cracker to eat. And they told my family they were taking good care of me. So a lot goes on with senior abuse and neglect. And last time I was in the hospital, they wheeled me into a room. They put a cover over the window, shut the door. They didn't monitor my blood pressure or anything. When the girl came in with the tray of food, she put it essentially over at the next bed where I couldn't reach it. Meanest, most cold-hearted nurse I've ever come across in my life. And that's not the only time. And I was respectful and thankful and all. I literally had to call 911 on my phone to ask them to call the hospital to get somebody to come into the room, because the charge nurse and the head nurse were out in the ICU arguing with each other over who had proper authority over everything. It was a mess. I would never go through that again. So the word says the kingdom suffers violence, and the violent take it by force. And I'm going to pray, if I have to scoop my legs out of the wheelchair every 5 or 10 minutes and go from wheelchair to bed and bed from wheelchair, back and forth in prayer, I'm just going to keep at it until I get some sort of relief, or God takes me home out of this hell on earth, this living hell on earth that I'm going through. And I know there are millions of other people seemingly worse off than I am. But see, the whole thing with messing around with nature was that I DIED'd in the accident years ago, and they revived me. And when they when they de-intubated me and pulled out all the life support stuff, I looked up the lady and I said, why? Why? Because I was in absolute paradise on the other side, and they dragged me back to this hell on earth that I live every day. And my relatives, my sister-in-law called me, why don't you talk to your relatives? Is nothing that anybody can do anything about to magically help me somehow. And it's one of those things, you get on the mountain and you're stranded, or you get in the valley and you're stranded. And if you aren't prayed up, and the word says, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge of the word, you have to confess the word over the situation, same as Jesus did when he was tempted and the devil said, turn this rock into bread. And Jesus said the word. He said, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. That's what I'm having to do every few minutes in order to take my next breath. It's horrible. I never thought that I would be suffering like this. Never. And I backed into a corner, and I have the DEATH with dignity people saying that all I got to do is send them a text message and they'll send somebody over and they'll give me something to drink, and a half hour of gurgling and struggling to breathe, it'll all be over. A half hour is a long time. A half hour is a long time to suffer like that, plus risking losing your eternal soul for taking your own life. I never thought I'd be suffering like this, fam. Never. Never. And see, people who fiddle around with nature, in our society, we abort healthy children. And see, fetus just means little one. People think that they avoid calling it a baby by saying fetus. Fetus just means little one. It's Latin. And then we have other babies, and they take them and they put them on life support and ventilators. And see, that's why the human genome is getting more and more sick. Back when I was a kid, it was rare when you heard that anybody DIED'd of cancer or anything like that. Now it's like every other person gets cancer. You know, it wasn't like in my day that people had food allergies and couldn't eat gluten. All gluten is a stretchy protein that makes bread stretch. So, they rename it, repackage it. They tell everybody they're allergic to it so they can sell them a pill. And they do terrible things to us, all for the sake of $1. It's all for a dirty daggone dollar. And these people get rich, and the word says, what does it do a man to own the world and lose your soul? And I didn't think really that applied to anybody until I found out people that are so filthy stinking rich, they're bored to tears, and the only thing left that they have to do is to boss and bully other people around. Horrible. And there's going to be eternal consequences. And I'm not ashamed. I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ. People say God because that's an innocuous way of getting around saying Jesus Christ. And when people pray, they pray to God and they say in your name because they don't want to name the name of Jesus. But fam, like I said, I'm in the fight of my life, and it's just going to be one of those things that it is what it is until it's settled one way or the other. PopPop out.